For our final Track 1 session of the day, we have David Parks, the Vice President and co-founder of Bluepoint Leadership Development. David spends his time coaxing and cajoling global organizations to invest in developing their leaders and realizing their full human potential. A co-founder of Bluepoint Leadership Development and part of the original team at the Tom Peters Company, David works with major clients such as GE, Qualcomm, GAP, Mayo Clinic, Stanford Medicine, and many more to provide workshops, coaching, and virtual experiences for all levels in the organization. Prior to entering the field of leadership development, David received real-world experience in managerial positions with Marks & Spencer Omnicom, the Health Club division of Forte Hotels in London, and the British Army Officer Training Corps. He is a graduate of Northumbria University and Teesside University Business School. He is professionally qualified with the British Institute of Management and recently completed the Alt MBA. When not transforming the world of work, David is a keen open water swimmer, cyclist, triathlete, and skier, and he resides in Mill Valley, California with his wife and 2 children. He will be closing out day 1 of the Champions of Wellness Virtual Summit with his presentation titled Professional Nag, Provocateur, Truth Teller, the Genesis of a Physician Wellbeing Initiative. Please welcome to the Virtual Summit stage, David Parks.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction. I really appreciate it, and it's my honor and pleasure to be here today, particularly with a group of like-minded individuals in the world of health and well-being. Because as I think back over the last 20 plus months, nothing is more important than your health and well-being. So my absolute pleasure to be here today. Full disclosure, right up front, I'm not a physician, I'm not a researcher, and I'm not an expert in health and well-being. But what I do bring to the table is 25 years of experience in the world of leadership development. So what I propose today is that I'll take you on a journey that juxtaposes those 3 worlds: leadership development, professional coaching, and health and well-being. And what I'll share with you is a study that came from the Mayo Clinic and was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association in 2019 that linked professional coaching to having impact on physician burnout. So that's the plan. But before I go there, I'd like to give you a little bit of a sense of who I am and what I stand for. So I come from Northern Ireland originally. I grew up in a small country town where community was very important. It was the kind of place where when somebody asked you, how are you, they actually really meant, how are you? I went to a school that was very values driven and had a sporting tradition. And that gave me my early interest in leadership development and in health and fitness to play sport. I also come from a family of doctors and nurses. My mother was a midwife, a district nurse, and a health visitor. And often repeated in our household was the mantra, your health is your wealth. So a lot of positive influences on how to think about health and well-being from a family perspective. I worked in London for a company that set up corporate health and fitness centers. And in my time there, I managed to migrate them from purely a fitness focus to a health and well-being lifestyle focus. And then fast forward, I moved across the pond to San Francisco and started my work in the field of leadership development 25 years ago. And that's what really led me to the doorstep of the Mayo Clinic. So that's the journey. And what I hope to share with you is really a new or a fresh way of thinking about the world of leadership development, coaching, and health and wellness, but more importantly, how to do it. And then once you get it going, is how to amplify that. So that's the plan, and my pleasure to be with you today. So the word genesis here is important because leadership development or initiatives come from fragile beginnings. So I'm going to take you back in time before I go forward in time and just give you a flavor of my world of leadership development and how I ended up working with Mayo. So I get to work with some of the finest companies in the planet. You can see the logos here, and companies like General Electric consistently rated the #1 company for leadership development. And 20 months ago, when the pandemic hit, leadership development got thrown into a tailspin because most of our work was done in the traditional classroom setting. And with the virus and the pandemic, all that shut down. So we moved to a world of virtual. But it was also at the time when leadership became more important than ever, and taking care of yourself became more important than ever. So there was a vital shift that happened in leadership development that actually saw us move closer to the world of well-being. So clients were asking for programs like leading the remote team, or how do you keep the airplane flying, keep the wheels moving in a pandemic through better coaching and better conversations. Of course, the pandemic brought with it stresses, so emotional intelligence became more important. And then the concept of building resilience. So a lot of our offerings now in the virtual world became closer to health and well-being to help people manage through that period. If you think about the concept of psychological well-being, there's probably nobody more impactful or has more impact than your boss on your psychological outlook. So think about leadership development really as we're in the business of building better bosses. And certainly the research from the Gallup organizations and the likes show that engagement levels are really at an all-time low. So focusing on leadership is the big lever that you can pull. And for me, as I look at the logos you see here, you think about the businesses of the Microsofts, the Qualcomms, the Infosys of this world. They're all businesses. And leadership's important, but nobody's in physical pain there. Nobody's getting hurt, and it's not life and death. But if you look at the medical logos, the Innovas, the Stanford Medicines, the KU Medical, and the Mayo Clinic, the work that we do in the healthcare field really can be a matter of life and death. So it has a special place in my heart when I get to work with medically based clients. A lot of our world is unfortunately what I call the initiative du jour. And you're probably familiar with this. You know, you want to launch an initiative, so you go out and research the world and you find leadership authors, gurus, books, and models. You look at coaching, there's all the different flavors of coaching. You look at the world of health and fitness. And of course, let's pick on the diet world. There's a million gazillion different flavors and formats. And as you think about how you bring health and wellness and leadership and coaching practices into your organization, it really can put you in the realm of overwhelm, the initiative du jour, the flavor of the month. So my advocacy in working with clients strategically about leadership development or creating that corporate home is to think very carefully, to think as a curator of bringing the best content to your organization. So curation, think about content and initiatives that are really going to connect with your audience, with your participant base, with your employee base, and that really are going to make an impact on the kind of culture that you build and grow. Culture is something that is very intentional. It's made up moment by moment, interaction by interaction. And the organizations that I like to work with are ones that veer towards a positive, healthy, and vital culture. So getting the right programs, the right partners in place is key. cutting to the chase, this is the results from our Journal of the American Medical Association, the study on physician well-being and the impact of professional coaching. The results are pretty outstanding. 19.5% in reduction in emotional exhaustion and 17.1 reduction in symptoms of burnout. If you think about any business metric, if you can make an impact of almost 20%, that's pretty phenomenal. So it's worth going for. So in my vocabulary, being provocative and pushing for initiatives is key. Too many initiatives just never happen. They reside in the mind of the idea that someday I will get fitter, someday I will get healthier. So stepping up and making it happen. Just imagine for a moment if you could implement something in your organization that would result in your teams, your people being 20% less tired, 20% less stressed, feeling 20% physically better, happier, more resilient, and better all around people to be with. That's something worth shooting for. Continuing the story, I'm going to take a bit back in history, because I think it all stems from how you think about leadership development. And part of why my thinking and passion around healthcare, it really was seeded in a piece of work we did 20 years ago at St. Agnes Medical Center in Fresno. And we were brought in to do a series of workshops because there was a very high turnover rate with RNs. And the client there, Rick Bolton, was spending a lot of time recruiting and just dealing with the turnover hassle. So he set up a series of workshops to really focus on the concept of building better bosses so that there would be retention. And we delivered these over a period of 6 months, stock standard leadership essentials type workshop. And at the 6-month review point, I said to Rick, are we making a difference? What are you seeing as a result? And he said, David, the work that you're doing is saving lives. And that one comment really reframed everything and how I thought about leadership development, that it wasn't just about delivering workshops, but really we're in the business of saving lives. So connecting to that higher vision, that higher purpose is key as you think about initiatives. That context sort of set the scene for me going into other healthcare organizations and led me to the path of Mayo Clinic. And this goes back 9 years ago when there was an interest in building internal coaching capability. And the presenting brief was that they had a lot of senior physicians coming up for retirement, and also a lot of senior physicians who were being promoted to department chair. So coaching capability became vitally important. And I got the invitation, along with probably about 6 other organizations, to pitch a coaching program. The picture you see there is the Plummer Building in downtown Rochester. And I remember distinctly before I went into that meeting, of course, it was a nervous time for me because this was make or break. This was the fragile inflection point of whether I would get to work with Mayo or not get to work with Mayo. So when you're in a high stress situation like that, what do? You call your mother. So I called up my mother in Ireland and actually said to her, I'm just about to go into the meeting with the Mayo Clinic. And I asked her, thinking back to your time as a nurse, what were the characteristics that made physicians and doctors great people to work with? And what she said was, David, aside from medical competence, it was caring that counted. So that one comment equipped me to go into the meeting. And I knew that if I could connect the concept of caring to coaching practices, which then would connect to the Mayo driving values of patient-centric care, we were on a formula to win. And when we did, this was the first part of the journey. And it really resulted in setting up a 2-day workshop with up to 30 senior physicians or people who've been identified for department chair positions to put them through a 2-day highly experiential workshop that really helped them get clear on what they needed to do as a leader, as a physician, to earn the right to coach and connect it back to patient-centric care, to be that better, caring, coach-like physician. The kicker to this, because the workshop is the easy part, over 2 days, learning to be a better coach through practice and feedback, is that after the workshop, each physician was assigned a leadership coach. So they had a role model for what it was like to be a coach, to be coached, but it also built in some accountability to make sure that the behaviors learned in the workshop would actually be applied. Beyond this, and this is so simple yet so profound, each participant in the workshop was assigned 4 other people that they had to coach. So 4 more people were getting coaching as a result of this initiative. And you can see how the impact, if you have 30 people coaching 4 people, taking it to 120 more people in the organization. So starting to evolve and embed leadership practices of appreciation and being more coach-like. I use the analogy of a flywheel, and you see the picture there of the erg. That's the most avoided machine in any gym situation because it is hard and it's hard to get started. And that kind of parallels with the world of leadership development. It really is hard to get it started, but once you get it up and running, you get what I call the flywheel effect. So just to play that out, in the course of 1 year working with 30 participants, and then they coach the 4 internal coaching assignments, that fans out to 120 people receiving the benefit of coaching. What then happened was, with the success of this program, after about 3 years, there was some more data around burnout, and they started making the connection around the whole community and building a more coach-like culture, that this workshop, Leader as Coach, was actually going a long way to help people manage their lives better, be more coach-like, be more positive in the corporate environment. So the connection was being made to burnout. And as a result, they doubled and in some years tripled the volume of workshops. We've been doing this for 9 years now. So we're really in a full force flywheel amplified impact of 9 years of workshops and coaching, building in that coach-like behaviors that impacts not just the direct reports of the physician, but it impacts all areas of life, that it spills over into personal life. So these physicians are showing up as better husbands or wives, better fathers, better all-around people, happier and healthier. And the impact has reached thousands. With Mayo, Mayo does have a distinct advantage, and this is a press clipping from a couple of years ago from a newspaper, and the picture you see is the CEO of the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Gianrico Ferrugia. And he kind of positions it well here. He has a profound sense of responsibility of carrying the Mayo values. He also, by nature and personality, and I haven't met him, by the way, but what I read and what I see on videos is he's an energizer. And one of his main goals and thrusts of his effort is bring joy back to the practice of medicine. So making that connection back to coach-like practices and an overarching corporate goal of bringing more joy to the practice of medicine. Mayo is not your average organization. And the values that were set back in the 1930s by the Mayo brothers really have become the pillar and the foundation that everything is built off to build that patient-centric care. I'll just quote from one of the Mayo brothers for a moment, and it's from Charles H. Mayo. If we excel at anything, it's our capacity for turning idealism into action. So the fact that Mayo has implemented the leader as coach, they've turned knowledge into action. They're actively building a more positive coach-like culture. And it's had this amplification effect, really led us to the next part of the journey. I said it would be an iterative journey. So the next part really came with Dr. Lotta Derby and her team getting in touch to initiate the professional coaching initiative. Started in 2017. As you can see here, the results were quite spectacular, but what's underneath it? How did it all play out? So here's the setup. It involved, in any one year, it involved 80 to 88 mid-career physicians from across the Mayo network, physicians who had between 5 and 30 years experience, and each one was assigned a professional leadership coach. Coaching was conducted by phone, and it was over a 6-month period. The initial coaching session was 1 hour, and then 5 half-hour sessions. So not a whole lot of time, but just enough time, and a drip feed approach over the 6-month period. Remember, behavior change takes time, and setting this up over a 6-month period really allowed us to work with the physicians over time to drive behavior change and help them get better. Participation was voluntary, and the way it was conducted was in 2 cohorts. There was the control cohort and then the actual intervention cohort. The baseline data was collected by Dr. Lotta Derby and her team, and we were off to the races with it. So how does it really play out? Probably the most important thing is the quality of coaches. Now, we did have an advantage in that we had many years of experience with leader as coach working with Mayo Clinic. So I had a team of trusted and proven coaches who were road tested and proven at the Mayo Clinic. They're all seasoned business leaders, people who've been there, done that, collected the battle scars, also are credentialed in coaching, but most importantly, really have a passion for helping leaders and physicians and people they're coaching be the very best. Just a few nuances with the team here. If you look at the top right-hand corner, Anne Morgan was particularly fitted to this because she actually came from a family where her father was a physician, and she also has been a cancer survivor, so walked in the shoes of patient. Beth Schumacher next to her, again, particularly appropriate, has coached many CEOs in the healthcare arena. And then right down at the bottom, Peter and Tracy in the UK had a lot of experience working with the National Health Service. So a really solid team of coaches that I actually allocated to the physicians. So what really went on in the coaching? I'm going to share with you some stories that I collected from our coaches. These are all confidential, so it's kind of broad themes, no names attached. But the first example here you see is an overworked, overstretched physician who was finding that they were getting sucked into spending actually too much time with patients. So time management was of the essence. So our coach worked with them on really being rigorous about setting the boundaries for time with patients. The next example you see is this was a physician who was very rigid, very angry, very defensive, and wasn't really aware of the impact that her shadow was casting on the team. When you have somebody that's in a mood, it's hard to work with that person. So our coach worked to really hold up what I call the behavioral mirror, that the impact of her mood and her actions and the impact that it was having on the team, and moved to a place of reframing and showing up in a more positive, joyful, spirited way with her team. This third example was a physician who was going at 1,000,000 miles an hour out the door early in the morning, late home, and really not paying much attention to his practice, his marriage, his children, and elderly parents were all suffering as a result. So our coach worked with that individual to really embed the positive habits and deliberate choices that would help them reframe and show up in a more healthy, positive way. This physician was somebody who, by admission, was clearly burned out, 20+ year career, and they had the gift of working with our coach. He was showing up quite indifferent to patients, was totally drained physically and emotionally, and had allowed some personal issues to creep into his professional life. So our coach worked with him on a plan for self-care, around time management, taking back control of his life. What was he going to stop doing? What was he going to start doing? And really take back control. And also on the positive emotions, the mindset and the emotional intelligence. And mindful that he didn't slip into the whinging sessions that tended to go on in his practice and distance himself from that. So being very intentional about what he stopped and how he started on a more positive track. And then lastly, this is another physician who was a cardiologist, really suffering with work-life balance issues. We heard the word EPIC come up a lot, dealing with the administration and entry protocol for notes, which had an impact on time with patients. So this individual didn't feel they were showing up in the way that they wanted to show up for patients. It was impacting into their weekends as well. So the solution that our coach worked on there was actually to pilot a virtual scribe to get help with the administration, to seek some support from IT, to really be clear about putting up the boundaries and saying no. And as a result, this individual managed to get more golf time in and more sleep, and showed up as a more positive, healthy individual in their practice. So just some real life stories from the field of working with the coaches. What I will say, every one of our coaches just felt that it was a privilege and an honor to be working with these physicians. They all showed up on time. They were diligent and they were serious about their own personal development. And that speaks volumes to the caliber of the physicians at Mayo and the mindset that they had. So going back to what I call the flywheel effect with this initiative, it's been running over 4 years now, 85 participants per year. So we've targeted about 340 positions now. Just think for a moment how that amplifies across the system. So across the Mayo network, these physicians are showing up more positive, more engaged, more healthy, more vital, and they're there for their patients. They're there for their families. So it's impacting in many, many facets, not just in the professional sense, but way beyond into their lives. So big, big impact. That's worth doing. Beyond that, there was a lot of positive PR and awareness. Again, this came as a result of the study, and just some of the statistics I'll flash up. It was picked up in 17 news outlets, 5 blogs, 443 tweets, and 76 citations. And that really is a testimony to the work done by Dr. Derby and her team here. You see the other names there, Dr. Tate Shenefeld and Priscilla Gill. And by the way, this study is fully available If you Google search professional coaching and physician burnout, Journal of the American Medical Association, you can get a full copy of the report there. So lots of positive PR and awareness. Thinking beyond the confines of Mayo, what impact did it have? Well, it spread far and wide. We find ourselves being brought into KU Med because there was a former physician from Mayo who had moved to KU Med, and he initiated a raft of coaching activity at KU Med. Another example is Stanford Medical, and this is actually Dr. Tate Shanafelt moved to Stanford Medical and brought with him the knowledge and the impact, and he's a world-renowned expert in the area of physician burnout. So we've managed to initiate a series of programs at Stanford Medical. These are virtual programs, and we also coach there. And then even across the pond, our work has transferred over to the National Health Service in the UK. This is with the Oxford University Health Trust, where we've also managed to do work there as a result of the work that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. So lots of impact around the world. Which brings me back to the whole concept of culture change. Just to encapsulate, the Mayo journey has been 9 years now, and you've seen the various iterations of how it's evolved and the various inflection points. But as you think about leadership development, about well-being initiatives, about coaching in your initiative, in your world, how do you make culture change happen? And how do you make it happen fast? Well, a lot of the time I get phone calls because people want to change their culture, and they typically want to do it through a workshop. And this particular example I'm going to talk about was a healthcare system in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And they booked a 2-day workshop to focus on their leadership development skills. And it was an opportunity to bring the senior team together to speak, to converse, to listen, to be heard, to talk about their most important strategic imperatives, but also learn about leadership. Now, one of the things in this workshop is we had a ritual where if somebody wanted to make an acknowledgement or a celebration, they could call timeout at any point in the workshop. One of the participants was the facilities manager. Now, just visualize for a moment, this was a crusty old facilities manager coming up for retirement, kind of tell it as it is kind of character. And he was actually loving the workshop. And he noted that on day 2, the CEO had come in to visit and say a few words over lunchtime. So he took his opportunity. After the CEO had said his piece, he raced up to the front of the workshop and said, "This has been a fantastic experience, and I'd like to acknowledge and celebrate it. I've had the best professional development ever in my career because we've got to talk about what's really going on in our organization. And as a celebration of that, I would like to present or create a new award, and it's the No Bullshit Award." Now, I share this with you. Remember, the context is this was on a retreat center on a buffalo ranch, and this wily old facilities manager had sneaked out during the lunchtime with his lunch container and inserted in said lunch container some real bullshit. So he presented this to the CEO, to the CEO's consternation. And he said these words. He said, "We never see you. You lead from behind closed doors. We need to see more of you. We need you to step up and lead." And it was the workshop environment that gave him the courage to say those words. Everybody was shocked and stunned. The CEO, credit to him, took the feedback square on the chin and said thank you and had a laugh. And the workshop closed out. Evaluations were terrific. But I was always curious, how is this story going to play out? So I called up the HR director a week, 2 weeks later and said, how's it going? Oh, what's it like? What's the impact on the CEO? And she said, David, he is a changed man. He said, that one comment by our crazy facilitators manager changed everything. I said, well, how so? He's out walking the corridors. He's out meeting with the physicians. He's out meeting with the clinicians. He has stepped up to the plate. He is a changed man. So that example, I share it with you. It will never be written up in the Harvard Business Review, but it is a true story about how sometimes if you create the right environment, change can really happen fast. So drawing to the end of our time together here on this circuitous journey of leadership development, of coaching, about how to think about it, how to do it, how to act upon it, I'd like to leave you with a prescription. And this is it. When it comes to initiatives, get away from the flavor of the month, the program du jour, but really think deeply and strategically, holistically, and long-term about how you put in a solid platform for development. Take action. It takes a brave soul to fire start, to experiment, to pilot, and to collaborate, to actively go out and build bridges between leadership development, from coaching, health and well-being, and all the other areas that are typically over there. Collaborate. And finally, energize. Be that spark, be that energizer, be that person who embodies great leadership and health and wellness. Be that flywheel. Look for the subtleties, the nuances, the inflection points, and really think about how you can get out to critical mass. Doing that one workshop wonder with a small group is just not going to cut it. That one initiative that just targets a small confined area, think about how you can get out to critical mass and really raise your thinking to be that bold champion of wellness. That concludes my time with you today. It's been my pleasure. It's been my honor. So here are my contact details. Please don't be a stranger. Feel free to reach out, contact me. I love to hear from people to talk about what my experience is and share best practices in this world of leadership development, coaching, and health and wellness. Thank you for your time today.